Hare Krishna Gauranga Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Prabhupada. Pranams to you.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us. You know, the GBC strategic planning team began in earnest to help the devotees with regard to the COVID. And then we kept moving forward with other interesting things in relationship to devotee care, like that. Today, we have the sober celebration of Jasomati Nandan Prabhu, who has just in the last 2 hours left this mortal world as a result of his contact with COVID. So I did not do a lot of service with him, direct service. I had been in multiple meetings with him over time, and of course always found him to be a Vaishnava and a gentleman. But I do know that his life was extraordinarily successful in the service of Srila Prabhupada. You, on the other hand, have known him well. Maybe before we begin on what we originally planned to do on this meeting, it would be very nice if you could tell us something about him, his life, his energy, and all of the success that he had in his life.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. I offer my prostrated dandavats to Yashomati Nandan Prabhu, wonderful Vaishnava who joined Srila Prabhupada in Detroit, and Srila Prabhupada specifically instructed him to establish preaching in Ahmedabad. As all of us are aware that, Gujarat has been one of the most important places from where now our current Prime Minister Modi ji has also been the Chief Minister for many years. So Yashomati Nandan Prabhu was very instrumental to establish Iskon's presence very strongly over several successful temples in Gujarat. The first one is in Ahmedabad, there is another one in Baroda, then there is another one in Vallabh Vidyanagar, then there is another one in Surat, one in Rajkot, Dwarka. So many such temples are there, and he was the zonal secretary, working very closely with His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. And because of his determined efforts, ISKCON has established very strong presence in Gujarat. And it was thanks to his leadership, his pioneering vision. And he was also very, very astute in study of Srila Prabhupada's books. And I have heard several of his classes. And he was extremely well read in Srila Prabhupada's books, especially the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He had a very powerful hold over the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And in the last 5 to 6 years, all of us could see an extra burst of energy in him. It was something very unique. His health was going down, but his enthusiasm and energy was growing. And it was as if he really wanted to give in the last bit of his every ounce of energy to push Srila Prabhupada's movement. So in the last 5 years, if you have seen the Ahmedabad temple before, the last 5 years it was completely redone with a new guest house, 25 to 30 rooms guest house, a beautiful, one of the best restaurants I've ever seen, and an amazing preaching in output which began over the last 4 to 5 years. So overall, I could see that he was really very much focused on getting the next generation of leaders together, empowering them, inspiring them, and be right there. And although he went through lots of ups and downs in his health over the last 4 or 5 years, he got a stroke which severely limited his capacity to move, but there was nothing to shake his enthusiasm and his determination. So he was like a fighter all through till the very end. And we really miss his association. He was a source of great inspiration for all of us, especially amongst the younger generation in ISKCON. And ISKCON Ahmedabad in particular is very much bereft of a very stalwart leader, and they must be feeling extremely orphaned by his absence.
Well, thank you for that, and all glories to Jasomati Nandan Prabhu. Maybe we could do our interview about you, but Before we even dig into that, let's just take this one step forward. All of Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples are older. Some of the, even the youngest ones are 65 and 67. What are we going to do? How will this movement continue from a succession point of view? What are the concerns that we have as a result of leaders such as Jasamati Nandan Prabhu leaving? All of us are going to be leaving one of these days soon. What to do?
Well, someone asked Srila Prabhupada once, what will happen to the movement after you leave? And Prabhupada said, I'll never leave, I'll always be present in my books. So basically, memory of kindness received is gratitude. Tam sukharadhyam rajubir ananya sharanen ribhir kratagya kono seveta duraradhyam asadubhi. The Bhagavatam defines gratitude as kritagya, to remember what we have received. So therefore, every generation of devotees, they remember what they have received from their previous generation, and then they try to reciprocate by trying to serve. And so we have to be grateful in prosperity and tolerant in adversity. And the beauty of the parampara is that as soon as the blessings come, then the empowerment also follows. So Raghunath Das Goswami, after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's departure in 1534, Mahaprabhu, incidentally, as we're, just a side point, as we're discussing about lockdown, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually took sannyas on 14th of January 1510 and spent 2 years traveling South India. Then he came back to Jagannath Puri 1512, and for the next 2 years he was trying his level best to request all the residents of Puri to allow him to go to Vrindavan. Because as soon as Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he actually wanted to go to Vrindavan. Nityanand Prabhu sent him to Bengal. There, Sachimata told him, you should stay in Puri, not in Vrindavan. And that was the beginning of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's actual experience of sannyas, where he had to renounce his original plan, which was to stay in Vrindavan. So then in 1514, finally Mahaprabhu managed to travel towards Vrindavan via Bengal. There in Bengal, Sanatan Goswami met him and told him, it's not good to travel in such big crowds. You should go back. So he came back again to Puri. And in 1515, Dashera, which is like tomorrow is Dashera, in 1515, Lord Chaitanya actually started his journey to Vrindavan. And he reached Vrindavan on the last day of Kartik and spent 2 months there. And then when he came back to Puri in 1516 for the next 18 years, he was there in Jagannath Puri. And if you have been to Puri, you have seen his, Gambhira quarters, which is a very, very small place, hardly 50 square feet. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was staying there in one sense, locked down. I mean, he would go around here and there, but the last 12 years he was literally locked down, but revealing that his mission was to unlock the love of God within. And so when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ended his pastimes in 1534, Raghunath Das Goswami felt totally desperate, and he came to Vrindavan to end his life by jumping from the Govardhan. So then Rupa and Sanatan Goswami told Raghunath Das Goswami that, why don't you just speak about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, and that will mitigate your feelings of separation. And so through service, the feelings of separation are mitigated by remembering the instructions of our superiors. We are actually able to associate with them. And I think Srila Prabhupada has created a beautiful blueprint by which this mission can continue if we follow in the footsteps of our predecessor acharyas, taking their instructions upon our head and trying to follow to the best of our capacity.
And then specifically, he has given us Srinam. He has given us the translations of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Right.
He has given us association, and an element of that association is Iskon. ISKCON is one of his greatest gifts. So it would seem that part of the answer is also we must serve ISKCON and continue to make ISKCON better. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Just like, you know, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the mission, and the mission was Name Ruchi, taste in the holy name, Vaishnava Seva, serving the Vaishnavas, and being empowered by the blessings of the Vaishnavas, Jive Daya, spread compassion. Srila Prabhupada gave us the institution, and thanks to the institution of ISKCON, we are actually able to spread Krishna consciousness and create impact in ways it would not have been possible as an individual. And I think it's extremely important for us to recognize this fact that thanks to the institution, we have been able to spread Krishna consciousness globally. And in the last 55 years, we have distributed more than 500 million pieces of literature, Srila Prabhupada's books, which would not have been possible if we did not have an institution. And last year, a couple of years ago in Chicago, during the World Hindu Congress, ISKCON was one of the organizations which was recognized and given an award for being an organization which has excelled in spreading the message of the Gita in multiple languages in every possible nook and corner of the world, in spite of whatever may have been the local culture. And the global Hindu community recognized us and expressed gratitude for making Gita so popular. That would not have been possible without an institution.
Mm. And in one sense, we all owe a debt to the institution because we became devotees. And it was through Srila Prabhupada's mercy of spreading Krishna consciousness through this institution that we came in touch with it.
Right.
Tell us something. How did you come in touch with ISKCON? What were you doing at the time? And tell us about how you joined.
Yeah, I was studying engineering at IIT Mumbai, 89 to 93. And when I was in my last year, one of my, uh, friends, he started visiting ISKCON and he got connected. And I was curious to find out what he's doing. And I started also attending. And I graduated and I was doing a job. I worked for a few months in a corporate. And then, interestingly, there was a car accident. Bhakti Rasam Maharaj was driving, and we went into an program, and we were returning back, and suddenly there was a truck which pulled up right in front of us. We were going at high speed, and the car rammed against the truck, and it was like a head-on collision. And it appeared that I'm not going to survive because the whole body was filled with blood and everything. And then, we were taken to a hospital, and the glass pieces were taken out. But amazingly, the injury was not much. But when I went to see the car the next day at the police station, they told me that whoever must have been in this car would not have survived. So I felt that I have received a second life, and that gave me the conviction that whoever has saved my life, I must dedicate my life for him. And so, I kind of got convinced at that moment to give my life totally to Krishna consciousness movement. And then, in India, the situation, especially amongst the youth, although India is the land of Sanatan Dharma, and we have approximately 270 million students in 1.5 million schools in India, and approximately 30 million students in colleges, in around 60, 70 colleges, say 70,000 colleges and 900 universities. But one of the biggest challenges is how to inspire them in sense control and having good habits, because all over the world more than 15 million people struggle with alcohol disorder. And you know alcohol kills 4,000 700 teens every single year.
Hmm.
And just drunken driving in America itself costs $199 billion every year. And tobacco smoking, I've seen young students get into addictions. And last century, tobacco addiction killed 100 million people. And this century, 2000 to 2100, it may kill 1 billion people. And it kills 6 million people across the whole globe every year. So, one death every 5 seconds. And that was a time when I was thinking we should do something to share this knowledge of the Gita with the youth. And so, both Radheshyam Prabhu and myself, in 1993, we decided that we would dedicate our lives to share the message of the Gita, to help, especially the younger generation, understand this knowledge much better. And that was the time Chopati Temple was also kind of beginning with the leadership of Radhanath Maharaj. So I think I was at the right time at the right place.
Hmm. And so your first service, you aligned with your dear friend Radhesham Prabhu, and you got your youth preaching going.
Yeah, I mean, we began with youth preaching at that particular moment. And then just after that, Radheshyam Prabhu left for Pune because he really wanted to expand the youth preaching, and Maharaj wanted somebody to go to Pune. And so that's how the youth preaching began. In Mumbai, we had a team of many people who were joining. And in Pune, Radheshyam Prabhu started, and few other devotees went to smaller towns across Maharashtra, and things got going from that point onwards.
And how did your service continue? Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, I began with preaching, and it was basically the most prominent service. But along with that, as you know, that Radhanath Maharaj is a firm believer in training in humble menial service. So he would always be emphatic that you should not be on the intellectual platform, you should be on the spiritual platform. And one time he told me that I don't want you to spend your whole life speaking about Krishna, I want you to realize Krishna.
Hmm.
And therefore it's important that you imbibe the mood of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of Trinadapi Sunichena. And therefore, right from the beginning, even though I was doing college preaching, I was also put in the kitchen. So part of the training was also cooking for the devotees and any other kinds of menial service which was there. And then, as the temple started growing, as you know, Leo Tolstoy in his novel Anna Karenina, he says that happy families are all alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way.
Hmm.
Which means that, for a family to be happy, it has to be fully functional in all its elements, all its aspects. And if there is a deficiency even in one of the aspects, then there will be problems. So as we were growing, there was a need to improve the administration. And so, Radhanath Maharaj then gradually started engaging some of us in administration, DT department, art department, improving the suites for the DTs and maintenance and cleanliness. And we were one of the first to create a full-fledged database, disciple database, way back in 2001, 2002. Then we also started a legal department. Then, as you know, that Maharaj had this vision of having Artha Forum, where some of the business people, they would share their profits with the temple, and through that we could buy a lot of property. And so we started a Govindas also. So that was also a unique experience. And then there was an overhaul of the entire temple. It's a 100-year-old building, so we had to do a lot of construction to make it really functional. And at that point of time, my good fortune was to be engaged in many new startup services, one which had no relation with the other. So
Hmm.
that gave a lot of experience and confidence. And then from 2005 onwards, I was quite focused on also improving the training, with respect to either Shastra training, training the youth who come into the temple, Vaishnav training, then Brahmachari training, skills training. And in 2012, we began the Bhaktivedanta Research Center in Govardhan Eco Village, and now it is affiliated to Mumbai University. For the first time, we created a system in ISKCON where any new Brahmachari joining will have to go through all of Srila Prabhupada's books of Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita for 2 years. Then they actually enter the ashram. So these were, some of the services in that particular period.
So you have, like, it's like at every step of your career in Krishna consciousness, you've taken on more and more responsibility. But if I'm to understand you correctly, the basis of that is your humble service mood, not that you wish to be some leader or something like that. You have some aspiration to lead. Rather, you have an aspiration to serve. Is that correct?
Yeah, see, it all depends on which context you are put in. So I have been in a situation where Radhanath Maharaj became the GBC for Chopati around the same time when I joined. And as they say that, sometimes relationships just work. So, he had certain vision in mind, and he needed someone to also help in executing. And I had the passion and the willingness to do that. And he's also not a person who would force somebody to do something, or push someone to do something. So he saw that there is some latent eagerness to engage in some service, and he kind of engaged. And that's how it was like, hand in glove.
So one of the very successful projects that you've been in charge of and worked on is the Govinda Eco Village. And
Right.
Give us a little bit of a history of that. I mean, it's such an extraordinary project. It's having worldwide effect. Tell us something about that. Tell us about the vision of it and
Yeah.
and how you worked with that.
So actually, Srila Prabhupada, when he established ISKCON temples in North America, he also had a great desire to have several farm communities. And some of them were like Gita Nagari and New Talavan and New Vrindavan. And so Radhanath Maharaj had spent time with Srila Prabhupada during his visits in New Vrindavan. And he had heard about Srila Prabhupada's desire for 5 things in New Vrindavan. Number 1, agriculture. Second, cow protection. Third, education. Fourth, having 12 forests in 7 temples of Vrindavan. And fifth was a retreat center. So interestingly, what happened was in 1972, Prabhupada did the Bhumi Pujan, or foundation laying ceremony for cornerstone laying ceremony for Radha Govinda temple in New Vrindavan. And just after that, the devotees, they approached Prabhupada and said that you want us to make a replica of Vrindavan, but we have not been to Vrindavan. So if you come and stay here with us, then you can guide us how to create Vrindavan. So Prabhupada said, yes, if you, make arrangements like that, so I'm willing to come and stay here personally and guide you about how to create these 7 temples. And there are, letters of Prabhupada to that effect. And then they started, therefore, creating the house for Prabhupada to live. And that house ultimately went on to become the Palace of Gold. So, I mean, that got completed only in 1979 after Srila Prabhupada left. So, in the process, what happened was that once the palace opened, it was so successful and it was so attractive, and it created such news everywhere. And thousands of people started visiting in buses to New Vrindavan. And, gradually, people who were leading at that particular point in time got more focused into other kinds of projects. And this original vision of Prabhupada on the 7 temples kind of, got relegated to the background. And so it did not manifest there at that point of time. And then when New Vrindavan came back to ISKCON in 97, so that time Radhanath Maharaj tried to collect Lakshmi and have something going there again to revive this. But again, certain problems happened, it didn't manifest. So at that point of time, Maharaj had one of his disciples in Pune who was doing a master's degree in architecture go to Vrindavan and take the dimensions of all the temples. And because Pune University gave a request to the Archaeological Survey of India, so then they permitted, and thanks to that, the Madan Mohan temple detailed drawings could be taken.
Mm,
And those drawings were also sent to New Vrindavan, and one drawing kept with this architect here in Pune. But when things didn't happen, so one thing I saw very amazing is that even if the vision of a leader, it does not fructify immediately, a leader may sometimes be perplexed, but he does not become discouraged.
mm,
And so I saw that Maharaj continued aspiring, and in our own case in Chopati we began the city temple, and the city temple is quite famous, Chopati temple. But most people don't realize that right from the moment we got the city temple in 88, from that time onwards we started searching for a farmland. And in
mm,
1996 we actually got a piece of 50 acres just outside Pune in a place called Daund. And it was cultivated and developed for agriculture, preparing for the Y2K from 96 to 2000. And for 4 years we had several families staying there of devotee farmers, but somehow they had some difference of opinion with respect to how the agriculture must be done, and so it didn't work out.
mm,
And so in 2001 we had to exit that project and close it down. And then for 2 years again we searched for several hundred pieces of land, and in 2003 we again got this land, which is the
mm,
current land. So till then the vision was Govardhan farm. But then as the climate change crisis loomed large, and then Radhanath Maharaj kind of brought in the idea of also something which will be sustainable. And therefore we kind of renamed it from Govardhan farm to Govardhan Eco Village.
mm,
And this was in 2009. So by this time I had been working with so many projects with Maharaj. So at that time, then he was really very eager that something like this be developed. In fact, he said, I would like to have this as my 60th birthday present, which was in 2010.
mm,
So therefore, at that particular point in time, we did not have any money even to go and do some research, because there were some issues. And one of the monks who was joining the ashram, he gave a donation of 200,000 rupees from the savings which he had, which he was going to give to his family. And with that, a couple of us went around India searching for different architects. And then finally, we selected one architect. And with the help of that architect, actually, one thing I realized, that we may be expert in Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita and philosophy, thanks to Srila Prabhupada and his books. But there are many other areas in life in which we are not the subject experts. And my biggest experience was to become humble in front of many such subject experts in different arenas. And then if we just be in the right mood and attitude with them and try to utilize their skills in Srila Prabhupada's mission, rather than trying to become expert ourselves, so it really goes a long way. It was an
mm,
important, during this Eco Village creation. And so now Govardhan Eco Village is accredited to four different United Nations bodies. One is the United Nations Environment Program, United Nations Convention for Combating Desertification, United Nations Economic and Social Council, and United Nations World Tourism Organization.
mm,
So we have a very wonderful connection with UN as part of a dialogue for policy for global environmental planning.
mm. Very successful project, and very interesting how you got that established. I think it was somewhere around 2012 or 11 that you began to do service on a global level with the GBC.
Yes,
How
that's
did
right.
you? So tell us that story. How did that start?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think, there used to be this Spam Ho email group. It's still there, but previously it was used much more than now. So on one of the Pam Ho free forum announcements, I saw, a letter which announced about various initiatives which the strategic planning team is starting. And
Mm,
then, at that particular point of time, you had various, divisional levels like devotee care, temple administration, this, that. And it was in 2010-11 that I had gathered a team of devotees, and we had conducted an ISO 22,000 for our kitchen and ISO 9001 for our temple. So I was
just some of our audience may not know what ISO is. Just a brief explanation on that.
Yeah, basically, it is international standards for creating systems. So, for if you have proper systems for quality control with respect to processes in your temple, then you get an ISO 9001. That means you create a system which is not a person dependent, but it is system dependent. And
Mm,
most of the globally acclaimed organizations have this. For environment, it is ISO 14,000. So this is basically kind of a benchmark for credibility with respect to a particular focus area.
mm.
So I was into that at that time, and then when I saw these announcements, so I thought, oh wow, there is a group of people in ISKCON who are also thinking about strategic planning and futuristic in their thought process. So then I reached out. I think it was an email ID for Kaunteya Prabhu, and I reached out to him, and then I came and met both of you in Juhu Temple, and you invited us to the next meeting, and then that's how the journey began. And I was so inspired to see, some of the initiatives, especially at the org dev, which have really inspired me. That to navigate leadership in ISKCON is quite challenging. And the way I have seen both yourself and Kaunteya Prabhu conduct meetings, which is very proactive, very determined, but willing to be patient. So it has been a tremendous learning experience for me. And, and especially I would like you to share something about your vision for the ILS, because that has been one of the most inspirational experiences for many of us in the next generation. How did you come about that?
Well, maybe we could talk more on some other on another interview because you are such a significant leader, and I'm sure our audience wants to hear from you. I work, as you know, in the background, um, but let's just go a little bit further with this effort that you started making. You joined the GBC Organizational Development Committee when? When did you join
Uh,
that?
I joined in 2013.
13, and have been
Yeah.
a member ever since.
Yes.
And that it's similar to the story that you told. Um, Radhanath Maharaj attempted this, didn't quite work out, but never became discouraged. Moved over to here, found success. It's almost sometimes I think of a saying that came from Winston Churchill: "No failure is ever fatal." And that kind of struck a chord in my mind. And frankly, he said another thing, which was not all successes last forever either.
Right.
So sometimes there's failures along the line. I believe that the efforts that the GBC have made a difference, and I think that one of the reasons is that we've stayed on it and we've
Right.
kept with it, and we never did get discouraged. So you've been a big part of that. The Organizational Development Committee has accomplished an awful lot. Certainly, we saw, and to go back to your question, I guess I will take the time to answer it. We saw a need for stronger leadership and management in ISKCON. This goes back to an interesting day that I had in 2005 or 6. I was visiting Giriraj Maharaj on a regular basis, telling him what I was doing in terms of my service and whatnot. And so he told me a story. And subsequently, I wrote that story up and sent it to him and asked him to approve it. Since it was his words, not mine, I was more or less reporting on it. But basically, near the time of Srila Prabhupada's departure from this mortal world, he was there serving Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada called for him in the middle of the night, and he was concerned because it was in a little bit of an unusual moment. Maybe he was even thinking that Srila Prabhupada was going to give him final instructions or something like that. So he hurried on down. It was in the middle of the night, like midnight, something like that. And Srila Prabhupada was in an internal space at that point, and it took him a minute or two to speak. And he asked Giriraj Maharaj, will this movement continue upon my departure? Giriraj Maharaj gave him a good answer, but it was actually not an answer that fully satisfied Srila Prabhupada. Giriraj's answer was, as long as we continue to chant our rounds and follow our principles, we will be successful. And Prabhupada kind of, in his internal mood, just went, and he waited for like a minute to speak. And then he finally said 2 words: organization and intelligence. That's what's required. So I became inspired by that story and other stories in my life to help with the organization. We talk about the Iskon Leadership Sangha as just one example. There is no event except for that event, frankly, where devotees, leaders get together and spend time on leadership and management topics. There's plenty of sanghas for kirtan and for festivals, and these are, of course, very, very important. The basis of our life is our devotional service, but part of our devotional service is to lead and manage. And so we created that. We've had good success with it. Typically over 1,000 leaders come every other year. Of course, we were to schedule one of these coming up in 2000 and our last one was 2020, and so then our next one is 2022, and we may be through this COVID thing, so that we may end up having that after all. We'll see. But yeah, it's a good thing. Now, you are also part of the nominations committee globally, so you do service on that. So basically, if we look at your career, you continue to take on more and more service, a lot of service in the zone of Maharashtra and that area, then global service. In that process, I think that you've seen a lot of issues. When we look at ISKCON from a futuristic point of view, what are some of the issues that actually really do need to be solved so that we can secure a better future for ISKCON?
Right. I think one of the first principles which we need to address is that the effectiveness of a decision is equal to quality of a decision multiplied by acceptance square. With the kind of modern day value systems which have affected people all over the world, decision making has become more and more difficult, because I don't think any other time in history each individual had so much power uh, of autonomy and expression. as they have today. So any decision which is made, 1 minute.
Electricity problem?
Yeah, it will come in 2 seconds.
Okay.
So any decision which is made, it is subject to heavy scrutiny. So I think this is a very important principle, that one of the biggest challenges which leadership has today is one has to be extremely mature and balanced. And I all the more appreciate Prabhupada's mood of a collective decision making body like the GBC, because that's very important in today's context. Number two, that apart from the fact that people have such a power of expression, the second is the wealth of talent which ISKCON has. So ISKCON is filled now with almost 99.9% congregation members. And if you go through the list of ISKCON temples in the Back to Godhead magazine, you know, those addresses and those buildings, they hold probably less than 0.5% of ISKCON's human resource.
Mm,
So, in actually one sense, the entire focus of ISKCON has become congregation based. That means they are right there, and most of them in the congregations over the last couple of decades who have got connected to ISKCON are very well established in their professions, in their careers, very successful, especially with respect to organization, administration. They have seen it all, done it all. And when they come to the ISKCON temple, then they would expect a certain degree of competence and governance. And therefore, for those who are managing and leading ISKCON temples, it's important to have buy-in from such stakeholders also. We cannot be disconnected and isolated from prominent members of our community. And
mm,
so, moving forward, our leadership has to reflect a more inclusive decision making, where we take in the opinions of our top members of the community and include them in some process. So that's a very important element. And I think the third element is that current climate of leadership requires leaders who can cope and deal with a lot of diversity and uncertainty.
mm,
So, the whole world has become like a global family, and so India has its priorities, West has its priorities, different countries, they have their cultures. So we need leaders who can deal with a lot of diversity, a lot of uncertainty, who can deal with talent, who can be inclusive and mature in their decision making. And I think then respectful love breeds joyful relationships. And the
mm.
quest for perfection has to begin with some imperfection. And relationship will need a balance of affiliation, autonomy, and appreciation. So we have to tolerate the past, accept the present, and hope for the future.
Okay. That's really beautiful. I know you work with a number of devotees. Ask them to transcribe that and send it to me. I really liked what I heard there. Okay.
All right, thank
Would
you.
you please do that?
Yeah, sure.
Good. So as you yourself look to the future for yourself, how old are you at this point? I hope you don't mind me asking.
I'm 49 and a half.
Yeah, right. So you have many years left that you can take on more and more service. So when we look into your future, how do you see your future evolving?
Um, I see that ISKCON has a lot of talent and a lot of dedicated devotees across the world. But somehow, you know, we need to integrate our global efforts better, and create a platform by which temples across the world get access to what some of the more successful temples have done. And I see my role in creating a platform where all the best practices and some of the more successful activities of different temples become available. And across temples, small temples, medium temples, large temples, the kind of activities in ISKCON temples is kind of more or less the same. But if you have to change 100 temples, if you have a group of 100 temples, then 20% are doing great, 20% are really lagging behind and struggling, and then 80 in the middle, or whatever, 60 in the middle, are looking this way and that way. So usually, typically, it is 10% at the top, 10% at the bottom, and the 80 are confused. So if we can create, two things. One is proper benchmarks which this AT can follow, and then number two, proper online training mechanisms by which leaders across ISKCON, and one of the initiatives you were also very much involved in was the GBC College. So that was just a small glimpse, but I can see that.
But you are a trustee of the college.
Yeah, that's right. But the whole initiative started from your idea. But I'm just sharing that if I see in the world of the Christianity, so many training modules and resources church administrators have, online resources. Even during the COVID, I was keeping track. So what the SPT did was like absolutely magnificent, because you were right there trying to provide the resources. And I think in today's day and age, ISKCON across the world has a lot of creative, talented people. If they just get some help, hand holding in these kind of resources, training materials, appropriate online interventions, mentoring, coaching. Now with this, COVID, people have gone beyond geographical boundaries, and people are willing to connect with anybody, anywhere. So I think that the COVID has revealed the tremendous potential where globally ISKCON leaders across the world could actually handhold and help each other. And stronger temples, more successful temples could help other temples which are just struggling. Temples which are already established could help those temples which are just beginning in their journey. And I think I see a role in that particular space.
So, Prabhu, I really love your vision of what your service is and how you see it unfolding. And I just want you to know I'm very much interested in seeing what I can do to help you in that effort. We're getting near the end of our time. And of course, we started our time speaking about His Holiness Jasomati Nandan Prabhu. I guess His Grace is maybe the more accurate term. But Jasomati Nandan Prabhu has just left with this COVID. Very unfortunate. Maybe you could just say a few words to, first, the leaders of ISKCON, and second, to all the members of ISKCON about the importance of staying safe. This is a nasty disease.
Right.
Maybe give us your thoughts. What should we be doing? Should we not be staying safe and wearing masks and like that? What do you think about all that?
I think it's an extremely, dangerous disease. One of the most dangerous I have seen in terms of its ability to spread without giving any warning. And I think we have to be extremely careful, especially, those who are above the age of 60, but even otherwise. And I think each and every devotee in ISKCON is very, very precious, and they have many, many years of service to Srila Prabhupada, which they are supposed to do. And we are hoping and praying that whatever precautions all of you have shared with in your SPT postings, I think a lot of amazing materials you have shared. And also that entire document which you put together on reopening of temples, I thought that was a brilliant set of information presented in such an appropriate manner. And I think,
Subhananda Prabhu and his team in South Africa created that as of course, he's a, full-fledged member of the SPT. Yeah, it
yeah,
was an excellent document.
exactly. So, I mean, these are the kind of initiatives which I think across the world of ISKCON. I mean, philosophy-wise, we have, amazing presence of Srila Prabhupada's books. We don't really need any help as far as philosophy is concerned, but I think it's worth looking at how many other successful spiritual organizations. I just connected with, I went to the Brigham Young University in Utah, and I had a whole tour there, and I saw how they have
Mm,
developed over a period of many years, and I connected with some of their leaders and found out how they managed to create a central fund. So I think there are a lot of areas and opportunities in ISKCON which need to be explored if we need to go to the next level. And I think gradually many like-minded across ISKCON will come together, converge, and through that conversations will begin. And I think that will be the beginning of transformation.
mm. So, Prabhu, thank you so much for all your valuable time. It was really great listening to you. I'm totally inspired. Let us talk again soon. But in the meantime, let's specifically talk about how I can be of help to you in your service.
Thank you.
I would very much like to do that. So, my obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.